At Lonsdale Street Studio, we believe in the power of storytelling to connect people and create change. That's why we're proud to be the production partner for this Running for Resilience podcast.
Welcome to the R4R podcast. My name's Matt. I'm here with a new guest today, which we'll introduce shortly. But the idea behind this podcast is to share stories, talk about mental health, and just champion whatever's going on in our community and keep it growing stronger. We believe that a suicide-free Canberra is possible, and we believe that a way to achieve that is to share stories, not just from myself, Benny, and others who are familiar faces with the audience, but everyone from within the R4R community. So we hope that we'll get many guests and many hosts, which we've got planned, and it's exciting. But today we've got Lili, R4R gift champion, I believe, Batemans Bay half marathon champion.
I'm very glad you mentioned that.
We'll talk about it later because I think we're going to get into it pretty quick, Lili. You have your fingerprints all over R4R in a way I don't think you saw coming.
Definitely not, no.
Yeah, the newsletter we started maybe it was 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, 2021.
And you were the second. You were the second, and I was just having a read before. We didn't know where it was going to go. We just wanted to build familiarity within the community. But we asked you a question about the hardest moment in your life, and you shared something that kind of tilted us on a good path.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we've ever spoken about why I chose to share that. I remember you messaging me with the questions and asking if I would like to take part in the survey or the get to know the runners. And of course I did. And I remember messaging you back saying, well, like, how deep do you want me to go here? Is this taking it a bit too far if I share this? And you said, share whatever you feel comfortable with. And I thought, okay, let's go for it. And there were sort of two reasons why I did it. The first was because
Firstly, what did you share?
Well, I shared that I had suffered from an eating disorder. I was diagnosed when I was 15 and I was in and out of treatment till I was about 22.
Yeah.
And it obviously had a huge impact on my life and my family's life and continues, I guess, in a way to have an impact on my life. And it's not something I speak about all that often. Like, people that know me, I don't hide from it. People that know me know that that's what happened and what I went through. But I never really spoke about it publicly. But when you asked me those questions, I thought the first reason was it kind of felt like I wasn't being super genuine if I didn't answer the way that I did. But the main reason was that when I was diagnosed with anorexia, I was 15. Yeah. So obviously quite young, and that's also now 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah.
So quite a long time. And I feel like mental illness, in my circle anyway, we were all teenagers and it wasn't spoken about as much as it might be now. So when I was diagnosed, there was a lot going on. I was obviously in denial, but I was ashamed and I was embarrassed because there are all those memes about mental health and being, the psych ward patient.
Yeah.
And that was my reality. Like, at some points I was in a locked psych ward.
Yeah.
And I felt really ashamed by that.
Yeah. And
I thought that everyone else, had their life perfectly together. And I was the only one that was going through anything like bad.
Yeah.
And as I got older, I realized that, that's not the case. A lot of people have things going on. It doesn't have to be a mental illness, but most people at some point have a chapter in their life that's not ideal, you know? But knowing that, I would still log on to social media and see people in my community, like my friends, people I went to school with, and just think, oh, their life is so perfect. Like mine's not like that. So when
you remember thinking that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if anyone has ever looked at me and thought that, but I thought when you asked me those questions, maybe there's someone in that community, in the R4R community, that has seen me at the runs and thought, wow, that girl, she's got everything together. And they were ashamed by something they were going through or embarrassed or struggling or felt alone. And I thought, if I can help one person by sharing my story and showing that it's not all what it seems, then that's a win.
Yeah.
And I actually never thought about the impact that it would have on other people feeling comfortable to share their stories.
Yeah.
But that was a really cool sort of thing that unfolded the next few weeks and months with the Meet the Runners.
Yep.
Yeah, it was really cool to see people feeling comfortable to share their stories and just helping people see that it's, you're not alone and everyone goes through things.
Yeah, and now where we are.
Exactly.
After our podcast.
Yeah.
What you just did there, I don't think many people can do that. So well done. And we'll go
Thank you.
a bit deeper.
I really struggle to say that I'm proud of myself a lot of the time, but I'm really proud of that, having that impact on Running for Resilience all those years ago.
Yeah.
Because, I think, as I said, I struggle saying that I'm proud of things I've done, but that was something that when you and Ben reference it to this day, like it makes me feel really good that I've had that impact and helped in that way.
Oh, yeah, I get goosebumps from that now. I know Benny articulates it pretty well, where he goes, shit, somebody else has got something going on in their life. And I don't know if you've ever seen it in real life where people's shoulders relax when they see someone else going through something similar.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, thank God I'm not alone.
Yeah.
You said you felt ashamed. And part of that is because you thought you were the only one that was going through what you were going through. Is that true? Like,
that I thought I was the only one, or that I was ashamed?
Or that you were the only one?
Yeah, especially when I was first diagnosed, I was 15, and so I was quite young and quite new. Like, I'd never experienced any mental health. I'd never been around that sort of environment. Like, I think I had a very basic understanding. Like, I didn't even really know, I didn't have a full understanding of what anorexia was.
Yeah.
I was in denial for years about it, and I didn't think that I would have that. And you get put in hospital or treatment and suddenly all these things are happening to you, and I just felt like a bit of a train wreck. Like, I just thought, and I felt embarrassed that I've put this on my family, like my parents and I've got two younger brothers, and I thought, I just felt, ashamed of it.
Do you remember the first time that you thought something was up? Like, I know you said you're in denial.
Yeah.
But or the first time you had to push back on what people were telling you?
I think the first time that I realised, like, within myself that something probably wasn't right. So I started disordered eating, I guess, when I started high school, and I started when I was like 11 and a half or almost 12. So quite young.
What does that look like?
It was subconscious. Like, I didn't realize that that's what I was doing. I had just sort of, I think, worked out that if I ate less, I felt better. And I think it wasn't, like, I was always a pretty normal kid. Like, I was sporty and I wasn't overweight or big. And I'd never really seen myself as that. So it wasn't like I was trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
I think I was just really stressed about starting high school.
Okay.
It seems silly now as an adult to be like, you're not grown up when you start high school, but I was really...
That's what it was at the time.
Exactly. And that's all you can, that's all you know that's all you know. And so at that point in my life, I was just stressed about all those changes. You're sort of going through puberty and there's things happening, and I was very... there was just a lot going on at that time. And so I had sort of worked out that if I ate less, I felt better. And I think at the same time, which kind of contradicts what I just said, there was obviously no social media at that point, but the sort of it girls at that time were Paris Hilton, Nicole Richie, Britney Spears, and they were always on the front cover of magazines, which I would see, I was in the shops with mum, and it was all about their weight. They were all very thin, and that was the look that was in, and the headlines were focusing on their weight. So I think I also, at the same time as not wanting to grow up, I was kind of like, oh, well, I'm growing up now, and this is what women do when they grow up. They don't eat. So it was sort of a weird mix. But then throughout my sort of high schooling years, I sort of was in and out of heavy restriction, and then I would sort of pull myself out and eat a bit more.
When you say heavy restriction, like, you're not eating much at all?
Yeah. Just really, really trying to limit what I ate. And
consciously at this time?
I think as I got like a bit older, I started to consciously be like
connecting the dots.
Yeah, the guilt I would feel, and I guess the anxiety I would feel would, if I ate, so I would be like, oh, it's better not to eat as much.
Yeah.
And that was how but I didn't know really, I didn't know what a calorie was. I didn't know what, my understanding of a diet was like, chocolate and ice cream, bad, apples, good.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it wasn't as intense as it got.
Yeah.
That was just sort of my very basic understanding and the way that I sort of went about those years. And I was also very into running.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a big kind of focus on the fact that if I was running and I was doing relatively well, there couldn't be any issue going on with my eating.
You said before we came in here, but when I told you not to use up all your gold, that you didn't have a traditional way of getting into, if there is such a thing, of getting into an eating disorder. It sounds like you sort of fell into it.
Yeah, over many years.
Yeah.
And I think that was then sort of the harder thing about trying to fall or climb back out of it. It was like all I'd known for so many years.
You'd built up
Yeah.
habits.
And that's honestly what I struggle with today as well, is that I don't really remember a time where I didn't think a certain way about food, which, it is what it is now.
Let's jump a few years,
Yeah.
jump straight to that. When you say you struggle with it today,
Yeah.
how is it the same, but how is it different for you? Because obviously you look after yourself a lot better now.
Yeah.
So how are you, what's different?
I would say, well, what's different is I can eat now, and I know that I have to eat. I think I put a lot more thought into what I eat than maybe the average person, and I definitely have a lot more anxiety around food. I think those that spend a lot of time with me get sometimes very frustrated with my inability to choose things, but then also my very quickly, snapping into that real hangry kind of vibe.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Yeah, you're not you when you're hungry.
Yeah.
And it's always funny because it's like I relearn this almost every day, that I suddenly eat something and then I'm like, oh, it's actually not that bad. I can cope with everything.
It looks like you're able to bring some humour into it as well. Do you think you've comprehended what you've been through enough where you can laugh? No, I don't know, laugh at yourself. Like I certainly can with myself. Do you find the same?
Yeah, well, sometimes if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So sometimes that's the best thing. I actually bumped into a nurse that used to look after me a lot in the paediatric ward a couple of weeks ago. And I hadn't seen her for years, obviously. And I am the first to admit that I was a pain, like I was a brat.
Yeah.
I was, a teenager, and I was also going through a lot at the time. So I apologized to her. And she said, you don't need to apologize at all. You know, we knew that you were going through something incredibly difficult, because obviously my anxiety was around food and I had to eat 6 times a day. So 6 times a day I was like, freaking out. And then, but it was actually, we had a really nice chat because it was like sort of full circle. We were able to laugh and remember some of the more bizarre things I used to do. And it was really nice to see her. And
Well, what was that time like where you were in care?
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's when I sort of get flashbacks now to when I was in that acute inpatient setting, and just sometimes think, surely that wasn't the same person, because some of the things I used to do were truly bizarre. But I spent a lot of time in hospital. So I was first admitted when I was 15 to the paediatric ward, which was just a general paediatric ward. Like, it wasn't specialised for eating disorders.
How does that happen? How do you get admitted? You go, your parents are concerned?
Yeah, so I started doing an outpatient day program, and that's when I was formally diagnosed at the start of 2010. So I was 15, and it was also the start of year 11.
Yep.
And so I think circling back to when I said I started restricting when I was starting high school, starting college or year 11.
Big change.
Yep. And I was someone that didn't really know what they wanted to do. I felt like everyone around me had plans for the future and what they wanted to do when they finished school, and I didn't. So I was very stressed. And I also, there was a lot going on in your life at that stage. You're getting older, things are happening, and that's when I really just couldn't pull myself out of the heavy restriction. And my parents then noticed, obviously. I mean, they'd noticed the entire time. They were always on my case about things, but they were like, this is going on too far. Yeah.
It's like gradual, which is, I mean,
Yeah.
that's hard to draw a line, but there was a point
Yeah.
where they said,
Yeah. So they took me to a psychologist at the end of year 10, and that was, a complete waste of time. I think I said 10 words to her the entire 4 sessions we went in.
yeah,
I just sort of looked at my feet and shrugged.
yep,
And so then she said, look, we're not getting anywhere here. And they got me involved with the eating disorder program, which is when I started a day program. And that's when I started more like formal kind of, I had to be weighed once a week. I had a meal plan. They were very strict on like no exercise. So I started doing all of that treatment for a couple of months, but my weight was just going down.
Yeah.
And they had, I think, certain criteria for when you had to be admitted to hospital. And so when I met that criteria, I guess, they were like, into hospital you go.
into hospital. And
Yeah.
then is it the normal hospital, like the Canberra?
Yeah, it was just Canberra Hospital,
Yeah.
as I said, in the paediatric ward, which is where I needed to be at the time, but it wasn't like a specialised thing. And that's I guess where I feel the guilt is, because I had, all the nurses and all the other staff at the hospital just trying to do their job, and they had this very intense teenager that didn't want to be there and was, a pain. Who they had to sort of manage eating 6 times a day. And I was tube fed for a long time as well. And so, I used to play around with that, and they had to somehow manage that as well as all their other patients.
How long were you there for?
So that time I was there for quite a few months, and then I came out, and then I went back in, and then I came out again. I was in and out.
Yeah.
And then I went up to Sydney to a clinic there called Northside Clinic, which is a specialised eating disorder floor in the clinic. And that was, I was one of the younger ones there, because you had to be sort of 16 and older to go to that clinic. So that was not the right place for me at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember your thinking at the time? I know you said you look back and you go, oh, it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
But do you remember what was going on inside your head? Like, was there any sort of rational, objective or
no
logical thought?
I don't think so.
No.
I kept a diary for most of my days in that period.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting to go back and read it, because it's just, I wasn't thinking straight at all. I didn't think I needed to be there. And I think that's where a lot of my issues came, because I didn't want to be there, but I didn't think I needed to be there.
Yep.
And I thought everyone was being dramatic. There was, nothing wrong with me. I had that kind of unhealthy way of being like, I'm not thin enough to be treated for anorexia, which I know now is,
But that's what you thought at the time. Yeah.
Which is, I know that eating disorders, you can look at the stats. Like, obviously my weight and all that was low. So I did need to be there, but I didn't, it was hard for me to see that.
Yeah, I think everyone in the moment of whatever struggle they're going through sees it, because you're right at the coalface, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to see the forest from the trees. Do you remember a moment where it shifted? Because you said that the way you got out of it was a little bit different as well. Do you remember the moment it shifted, or that first moment where you go, maybe I can do something about this, or I want to do something about this?
I think it took quite a few years, because when you're in that kind of environment, it's like everything revolves around what your next meal is. Have you ticked off? Like, I used to have people come and tick if I had my morning tea, or cross if I didn't.
Yeah.
And I was being weighed 3 times or 2 times a week, and everything revolved around if I had eaten and what my weight was. And so people kept telling me that there's a beautiful life out there for you to live, and you're wasting your life, and you're wasting the best years of your life in hospital, and you'll look back on this and regret it. And it's very hard when you're in that mindset and in that environment to see how, because from my perspective, at this stage I was 19, I hadn't finished school, I hadn't got my license, I pretty much lost contact with a lot of, my friends. I didn't have good relationships with my immediate family because I was, we were just constantly having World War III, like
Yeah,
every
yeah.
mealtime. And I didn't, I just couldn't see like what else there was for me because everything I had to do to get to that normal life that all my friends and peers were living just seemed like such a big ask. Cause I
And
was
you
like,
didn't want to do as well?
it wasn't that I didn't want to do it. I couldn't see how I could do it because there were so many steps that I had to take to get even to like being remotely close to where I should be as a 19-year-old.
Yeah. Did you come across somebody else's story that helped you?
I read so many stories and, people were always giving me stories or telling me about people. I think when I was in that really bad mindset, I was always like, yeah, but they've got something to live for and I don't. They're good at this. They're pretty. They're whatever. Like they're better people. And I just didn't think that I was any of that. So what was the point?
Yeah. So who'd you rest on? Like, family would have played a massive part.
Yeah. So my parents, like I always say, I wouldn't be here today without them. They went above and beyond what I don't know, I guess because they're my parents, maybe they should, but like they were just there every step of the way. Like we went through it all, like, arguing, all the emotions, crying, everything. And I feel bad now about what I put them through, but I'm also so grateful for them. And we have a really good relationship now.
Yeah.
But they were just there every step of the way. My mum got me enrolled in the vocational college at CIT because she was very big on like, you need to finish school.
Yep.
And it wasn't an option for me to go back to my old school because it was just too hard to go back and, be in a younger year group. So she was very big on that. She used to drop me there and I only went once a week at the start, just one class. But that was sort of the beginning of me being like, oh, there is more out there.
That was the beginning.
Yeah. And it was also, I would sit in a class where no one knew me. So no one knew that I was Lili with anorexia or I was the anorexic girl. It was just like, this is Lili.
Yeah.
And no one needed to, like, no one was asking, oh, did you eat today? Or, all that. So it just kind of gave me a break from my life. And I used to love going to that. It was every Tuesday.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
The change causes stress initially.
It did. I didn't want to go initially.
The change was almost your outlet.
Yeah.
To reverse it all as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see you. Sorry if this is a bit of a hand grenade. I could see you get a bit emotional, but in a good way, about your parents.
Yeah, I think.
Like you said, a lot of gratitude.
Yeah, I do. And like my whole family, like my grandparents, my brothers, my sister, we all went through it.
Yeah.
I think there was a really good quote from someone. There was a very, I think 60 Minutes years ago, one of the first interviews they did on someone with anorexia was this young girl called Bronte, and her family sort of said Bronte didn't have anorexia, the whole family had anorexia. And I was like, it's so true. So unfortunately true. My poor younger brothers going through high school and having to deal with my problems. I feel very bad about that. But
do you like? I know you feel bad, but are you also able to kind of be kind to yourself as well?
I think that now the relationship that I have with my brothers in particular, because they're younger than me, is really good. Like they don't live in Canberra anymore, but we're still incredibly close and I wouldn't I love them so much and I'm so thankful for them and thankful that we can, we've moved past that phase. And I don't think I've ever actually told them, but they were a huge part of me getting better. They don't know it.
How so?
So when I was a little bit older, I think I was 22, and my brother was in year 12 and he was turning 18 and he was sort of, growing up.
Doing what brothers are doing.
Yeah, and it was a weird feeling when it's your younger brother as well. It's kind of like, oh, he's more advanced than me. But I think just watching him go through that, like turning 18 and getting his license and all of that kind of thing. And I just thought, well, why can't I do that? He's living his life. There's no reason why I can't either.
Yeah.
And so it really motivated me to keep going. And I think, to keep pushing ahead and keep moving in the right direction.
There's a couple things coming to my mind, and they're all good things. One, I think I spoke about it with Benny in the first episode, is that resilience safety net.
Yeah.
You know, you had your family, friends,
Yeah.
your brothers, your grandparents, your parents, and they're there to help catch you when you fall.
Mm.
But then you're also seeing, like, it's the power of community as well, as when you see others doing well, you kind of want to join in. And
Yeah.
it kind of helped drag you out
Yeah.
of what you were going through. When was the first time you felt normal?
Ooh, do I ever feel normal?
That would get
Um,
philosophical. But you know, when
yeah.
I told it, like, there was a moment where I felt normal, and it gave me hope that I was that I wasn't gonna be controlled by this thing hanging in the back of my head and this, like, uncontrollable fight or flight that was just with me for 3 months. I got a bit of normalcy for half an hour, and I was like, thank God, like, I'm going to be okay. Or at least in the moment I thought that. Do you remember having that moment? Or did you have that moment like that?
I don't know if I remember like a particular moment, but I guess there was a period of time when I was 22 and I'd stopped any formal sort of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just living my life. And I that's honestly what helped me was taking the shift away from my eating disorder and focusing on me as a person, as not an illness, and what I wanted to do, and not revolving my life around appointments and therapy and you know.
The coming of age of certain.
Yeah. So I think there was just a period of time there where I had weight restored myself, which I think is actually a pretty key point in recovery because, as I said before, you're not you when you're hungry. And I guess the reality was I'd been hungry for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And I remember the doctors always telling me that it takes a little while once you're weight restored for your brain to catch up and for things to seem a bit easier or clearer. And I never believed that because I guess I would be like, well, I was at a healthy weight then and everything still felt the same. But in reality, I was at a healthy weight for, not very long in time before I then lost weight again. So my brain, I guess, never had a chance to catch up.
Yeah.
But I had been weight restored for a few months. I had deferred uni, so I just didn't have that stress.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just working full time and just sort of figuring out my next move. But I remember just being like out for dinner with a friend one night. And normally that would be a huge thing because
it would just take up so much bandwidth.
Yeah, I would just not, I would either not do it, I'd spend weeks stressing about it, or I just, would lie about eating. But I was there eating and I just thought, this is so much simpler than it has been. And that's when it kind of clicked to me. I was like, I need to go back to uni. I need to.
You felt like you were ready.
Yeah. Like, and it was just, life was a lot easier to cope with when I wasn't hungry, I guess.
Yeah. A bit of a thought experiment. That girl who was shrugging her shoulders in the psychology room, or that girl that was fiddling with the cords or whatever in the paediatric ward, if you could walk into the room and see her, what would you like? Would you say could you say anything? What would you do, or would you just sit there and just be there?
I think, what would I do? I think I'd first of all give her a big hug.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, you are enough. Like, you don't, just being you is enough. And you don't have to make yourself seem better, or, just being you is enough. And then I think I would just sit there for a while.
Yeah.
And not that I ever felt alone, because as I said, I had my parents there, but
you were on your own in your own struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
or at least you felt that way.
Yeah. And I appreciate that if you have never had an eating disorder or disordered eating, it is a very bizarre thing to try and wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Like my poor grandparents, I think my granddad in particular, love him to bits.
Yeah.
And he's done so well. But I can imagine how frustrating it was for him to sit there and see this very
Why won't she eat?
slim
Yeah.
girl just refusing to eat. Like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And it's very hard, I guess, for other people who haven't been in that position to sort of understand the anxiety and the guilt.
That everything's associated
Yeah, and what
with it.
drives that very bizarre behavior.
I think that's key. It's like if you haven't been through something, you don't
Yeah.
know what the other person's going through. And I certainly judge mental health differently even after my dad's passing.
Mm.
Until, I went through my own. I was like, oh man, I have like a lot more sympathy and empathy for my dad now because of what I've been through, and I can only imagine what, your family would have gone through.
Yeah.
You walk out of the room after being with yourself for a bit, you see your parents in the hallway. What would you tell them anything? What would you tell them?
Oh, I'm a big crier, so I probably would cry.
Yeah.
Just because it is emotional.
Of course.
Thinking back to some of those like dark days and just the helplessness that they must have felt.
Yeah.
Just seeing their daughter. I mean, I probably didn't even seem like their daughter anymore. Dad used to call me a zombie because I remember I would just sit in the family room at home and I would just be listening to their conversations, but I just couldn't be bothered contributing because it took too much energy. And I would just sit there and he'd be like, you're a zombie. Like,
Yeah.
you're not doing anything. And it would be so hard for them to just watch that, and I guess frustrating at the same time because they just want me to be better, and it seems so simple of what I had to do. But I think I would just give them a hug and thank them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bit of it's like frustrating, isn't it, that there's no quick fix for something like that. It's a lot of enduring and patience and support.
Yeah.
And I guess trust.
And also, like, it's a hard one because I think because it is like an addiction, but with other addictions, you can live without the substance, but you can't live without food.
Yeah.
So 6 times a day, I was having to face that. And it makes it tricky, because the reality is you have to have food. Yeah. So I had to eat to get over it. But that was also what was causing me so much stress.
I'm very impressed with how you're talking about this.
Oh, thank you.
Now. And I can see why you're proud of how you've tilted R4R in a certain way. I can see how you should be proud of how you're talking about this now. How has it made you a better person? Like your family's, you said you've got a great relationship with your family now. You seem to be comprehending it really well.
Mm.
Yeah, how are you better for it? Or are you better for it, or what's...
That's a tricky one.
Why?
I think it depends on the day because
Okay.
I get really frustrated by how long it took me to get to this point. And I think back to, years where I maybe didn't put in as much effort as I could have to getting to this point. But the reality is, like, that's what happened.
Youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah, exactly. I think when I have those moments, it's when I'm in a crisis about being in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I think, well, you wasted half your 20s. I don't know if it's made me a better person. I think it's made me more... Well, actually, it has made me more resilient.
Yeah.
Because I think back to the places that I was in and the deep holes that I sort of dug myself in and I managed to get out of them. So if I think now to other things that I will probably face in the future, I can sort of lean back on that, not necessarily, tools, because it's probably a different situation. Yep. But just the fact that I did get through it is probably enough to hopefully...
a bit of evidence in your back pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be used for good things like the Batemans Bay half marathon.
Yes.
Seriously though, because I'll give you an example of when I ran my first marathon. I was telling myself, it'll get hard, but I'll be ready. Like, that was kind of my mantra. Running is like, I know it's going to get hard, but I'll be ready. I'll push through. How does your previous struggle with eating disorders and your endurance to get through it, but then your overcoming as well, how do you see that in your everyday life now?
Well, I think
Or even in Batemans Bay Half Marathon?
I'm incredibly stubborn.
Yeah.
So I think that probably helps if I like to, stick to what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that you mentioned the Batemans Bay Half Marathon because I don't know if you know that I did it last year as well.
You're 2 back-to-back champions?
Not quite.
Oh.
I was running in first place
Yep.
at 19K.
Yep.
Don't know what happened. Like completely passed out. It was a really hot day.
You were going really hard.
Got heat stroke.
Yeah.
So
I think I remember you telling me this. Yeah.
So I had a little bit of extra motivation this year to redeem myself.
To not pass out.
Not pass out, get to the finish line standing.
Yeah.
But I think I'm just I sometimes don't know if my drive for running is because I do have that sort of exercise push in my head.
Yeah.
From the eating disorder days.
Okay.
Or actually more just probably, I've always loved exercise, but that definitely did play a part of it.
Well, it's interesting because we spoke about how change caused stress.
Yeah.
But then change was also really good for you.
Yeah.
Getting into finishing your Year 12 certificate. And then you go, okay, exercise and stubbornness would have been not great during the hard times. But now you're leveraging, I guess let's call them predispositions, like stubbornness. I know I'm stubborn. It can be a good thing.
Definitely. And, I love running, and I did love running before I got, really unwell. And then there was a long period of time where I never wanted to run again because it sort of brought back a lot of bad memories. And I don't think running is what caused me to get unwell, but it definitely wasn't very pleasant there for a while, when I was using it as a tool to sort of cope with my guilt. But now I do think that I have, a very healthy relationship with it. And I do it because it makes me feel good, mentally.
It's a different association.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember the first fun run that I did when I got back into running. And I started running because of the stress of uni in my final year. Mm-hmm. And it just felt good. And then I saw that there was a 5K fun run coming up for Lifeline.
Yep.
And I really wanted to do it because Lifeline, I've personally used it, but I also have had friends or people I went through treatment with who unfortunately took their own lives. So it's very close to my heart.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, take part in that fun run. So Mum and I did it together. And the feeling that I got finishing that 5K.
Euphoric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was incredible. Like I just felt on top of the world, and I thought this is the feeling that I used to get before running turned sour for me. And then we started park running, and
Yeah.
8 years later we're
I get goosebumps again because I imagine that run would have been quite symbolic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost like a new chapter. Or
yeah.
End of a chapter.
From so many perspectives, it was, the fact that I was running, I was able to run, first of all, physically, and that I could do it in a way that was sustainable and healthy. The fact that Mum, bless her, came with me and did it with me, and that, it was for a good cause, and it was a good vibes and good community, and just all of that combined, I just felt like this is, the best feeling.
Calling Lifeline. I know there's definitely somebody who'll be listening to this that might be scared.
Yeah.
To reach for help. I certainly, like you, I've followed a different path in my own journey. Like I feel like I've been quite lucky in that I've been able to internalize in a healthy way and come up with good conclusions, and because I've never really asked for help. And I asked...
It's hard to ask for help sometimes.
Especially if you don't know what's going on in your head, or if you're scared about the person, for lack of a better term, turning around and saying, yeah, you're messed up.
Yeah.
And it's I think that's what scared me before I spoke to people. Do you remember the moment you decided to call them?
Yes. I was just by myself. I was really upset. I was in a very bad place for a whole range of reasons. I think that I'd had a big fight with Mum and Dad about dinner, and this is when I did have my license, so I just taken off.
Yep.
And I just didn't. was like, I can't do this anymore. It's been years. And I couldn't see how, because we were just having these same fights, and it was almost like Groundhog Day for me, because every day was just the same over and over again. I just couldn't. I was like,
It was
I can't.
chipping away.
Yeah. But it was, and in that moment, because I was so alone, like physically and mentally, because I was like, no one understands this. No one understands what I'm going through. And it was just having that conversation with someone, and it was almost like a distraction, because they just were asking me what was going on.
Yeah.
And
What was hearing the ringtone like? Like you dial the number.
Yeah.
And you don't, like, obviously there's something in you that wants to feel better. What are you thinking when you, like, what's going through your mind?
Well, I think there was part of me that, I guess the negative part of my brain was like, why are you being so dramatic?
Yeah.
Why are you...
You're being critical of yourself.
Yeah, like why, just get on with it. Like, and then the other part of my brain was like,
I need someone to talk to.
I just need someone here to talk to. And I always have this thing, I guess, when I'm really upset, is I don't want to worry other people. So I feel like even now I do it. Like if I send a message or I talk to someone, I'll always end it with, but I'm fine.
Yeah.
I don't want other people to get worried about me.
I don't think you're alone there.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be a burden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
feel like a burden.
Yeah. So I guess, I'm very fortunate that I lived right near my grandparents. So, and I am very close with them. And so I could have gone around to their place, but I didn't want to, because I didn't want to burden them with, another episode of Lily and mum and dad having a fight over food for the 9th year in a row. And so I just felt, just alone, but I just needed someone.
And then after the call, how'd you feel?
I mean, obviously there was still...
You still would have been upset.
Yeah, I was still upset, because there was still things that I had to go back home and face, and I was still like, I've got to get up and do this all tomorrow. But I think it just took me out of that acute, like, I can't do this. It got me through that stage, and it kind of just got me back up to the level of, okay, we're like, this is hard.
Yep.
We've got...
Gave you a boost.
Yeah, it just gave me a boost, and that was enough to get me through that particular moment.
Yeah.
And then I remember I just sat by myself for a bit in the car, and then eventually I came home, and my parents are always so forgiving.
Yep.
And I can't remember exactly what happened after that, but I guarantee they would have just given me a hug and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got good parents, it sounds like.
Mm.
I can see why you've become such a big part of R4R. You've obviously got your personal stuff, and then you said that you had friends that you've lost as well, or people that you've come across.
Yeah.
When you first came across R4R, was it just another running group, or was it the story? And both are fine answers. But what was your introduction to R4R?
Well, Ben, because I knew Ben from Parkrun, and he was sort of saying you should come along.
Yep.
And then I think it may have stopped for a few weeks with that first COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then when it started back up again, I think in May, from memory, that's when I started coming.
Yep.
And there were, it was two things. I was really getting into, joining running groups again, because I had always run alone, and I didn't want to run with other people.
Yep.
But then through doing Parkrun and meeting people, I was really loving running in groups.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one was, I'm very passionate about promoting positive mental health. And now for my life at the moment, obviously I'm not needing acute treatment or therapy. But everyone still has those days where you're like, I can't, it's just been one of those weeks, or there's a few things going on. And that's
just
what I
life,
love.
Isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And running for resilience is great for that, because it's just that boost that I need with the community and seeing other people. I think you referenced it in your podcast, but just getting out of your own head. And that's what I love about it.
I think that's it's certainly helped my own.
Yeah.
Is that summing it up in those words, just getting out of your head. It's so perfectly described, because sometimes you are just in your head and you just need to be somewhere else for a moment, whether it be playing footy, whether it be watching a TV show, talking to someone. It's just like, just to reset your thinking
Yeah.
and enter the evening with a different perspective.
And you always leave so much, like I always leave in such a good mood when I'm driving out of that car park in Kingston.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just because, sometimes I'll finish work and I could be like, especially in winter, it's
Mhm.
cold and dark and windy. And I thought, I can just run from home or I can run from work and get it done. But I always feel so much better when I leave because I've talked to people. Even if I haven't spoken to heaps of people, it just being around other people and having that circuit breaker for whatever was playing on my mind, it just distracts me from it. And I think that, that's the best thing.
It is. I know before we started this podcast, you were very conscious. I wouldn't say worried or anything. You were very conscious that you wanted to talk about your own story, but not from a talking on behalf of other people.
Yeah.
What would you say to the broader audience someone might be experiencing something similar to what you've gone through? Where do you think they can go? I know you kind of touched on it before we started talking.
Yeah, so the Butterfly Foundation has great resources and support networks that you can join. I would also recommend speaking to your GP or, family or friends that you trust, because getting help is the most important thing and everyone deserves that help. I think it's very common to think that you're not sick enough or you don't, it's not that bad. But the reality is that it's not going to go away, or it's unlikely to go away unless you sort of get some resources and support. And the earlier you get onto it, the less ingrained some of those thoughts and behaviors will become. So that's my tip, is get onto it.
And you said sometimes people need to find their own way through, because we spoke about it. Butterfly Foundation, fantastic. There's all these other organisations in different parts of mental health that are fantastic, and it's no buts. They are fantastic. Sometimes people won't resonate with their messaging and they might need to go look elsewhere for help.
Yeah, so I did every kind of treatment. I think I did individual, I did inpatient, I did outpatient, we did family therapy for a bit, and they're all good. They can definitely help, but you have to be in the right mindset for that help.
You got to be ready.
Yeah, and so what I found, I just wasn't ready. But what I did find really helped me was just finding my life outside of the eating disorder and becoming me again, not, Lili with anorexia.
Yeah. I think we're getting close to the end of the podcast, which is, we're not wrapping you up, don't worry. Whenever I ended a talk or whatever, I always like to talk to one person, and it was always, I don't need to know you to know that you're going through something that's real, that, I believe in your ability to overcome it. Do you have a message for anyone of that ilk that, I give you one. When I was going through the hardest part of my life, of all people, it was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I saw a video of him and he said, I needed somebody in that time to tell me that it would be okay. And I remember that resonating with me so much. Regardless of who he is, it just resonated with me heaps. And so whenever I got a platform, so to say, I just wanted to give somebody a chance to resonate with something. Do you have anything that resonated with you at that time? Or I know you mentioned Brooke from 60 Minutes, but do you have anything you want to say to someone who might be going through something hard?
Yes. You can do it. There is, there's going to be all these obstacles, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. You just have to keep fighting and pushing, and eventually things will start falling into place.
Yeah.
And it's worth it.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Lili, you've been great on this.
Thank
And
you.
I don't want to set a precedent that if I don't say this, someone hasn't been great. But it's kind of fun. I think you'd be really good at interviewing somebody else. Do you have anyone out there that
Ooh.
we could throw into the ether and see what happens that you'd like to interview?
Anyone in the world?
Anyone in the world?
Kim Kardashian.
Kimmy K. If we can
I'm
make
sure
it,
she's listening.
if we can make it happen, we'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Lily, thank you.
Thank
That
you
was
so much.
honestly awesome. Well done.
Thank
Yeah.
you.